You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I am most excited to have two playwrights and folks in plays and entertainment. Paul Adams with new production, Doris Day, My Secret Love, and Caytha Jentis with Sex Play, and going to be talking about these plays. Going to be on the stage, and wanted to welcome both of you onto the Arts and Philosophy show, and welcome on.
Thanks, Ken. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to be here, and when we get into it, you'll understand why.
Yes. I wonderful relationship via email with Andrea Alton, and I want to tell you something unique in my experience. It's put me into contact with plays and what's going on in New York, and just kind of fresh ideas. So I've had this kind of vicarious living over from Oregon, seeing these wonderful productions. So I wanted to start with you, Paul, and regarding your production, Doris Day, My Secret Love, and everybody. Just so you know, Paul's the founder of Emerging Artists Theater, and for quite some time in founder, and a lot of experience around producing plays and writing, and so we're going to drop into that world. But Paul, right off the bat, tell us about Doris Day, My Secret Love, and what's going on for you right now.
Well, this play started about 6 years ago. I just got an idea in my head about Doris Day and just had to kind of get it out of my head. And it started out as a solo show with just a male accompanist. But then as we were working through the development, I found that it was just her kind of telling stories, and it was not very active. So then I decided that to bring in a concept of that she's at a retrospective of her life, and without her knowledge, the producers are showing photos of her past life. So these photos kind of shock her into flashbacks. So then her accompanist, who's her friend Les Brown, who wrote Sentimental Journey, that they recorded together, he then becomes all the different men in her life. And so it made it much more active and much more of a journey for the audience. But we've been working on this for about 5 years, and I just actually did some more rewrites 2 weeks ago. So we open a week from Monday on Labor Day, and we run for 8 weeks off-Broadway along with Caytha's play in Rep. And I'm really excited to see. There's a lot of people, I think, who know who Doris Day is, but I think this will give them a more insight into her life and what, she was always like the American sweetheart, but she had a lot of kind of dark stuff happen in her personal life that a lot of people didn't know about. And the actress sings about 14 of her favorite songs. So.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited. I'm excited for it now. Sometimes when I find out about these things, I'm like, well, I really want to jump in and see it. But it's super to hear about. And I'm going to jump over to you, Caytha, about just giving us the listeners a little preview of sex work, sex play, and what's that project about, and jumping into writing. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, it's funny, just to go back. So Sex Work, Sex Play is a comedic farce, and I'll tell you a little bit about it, but I am such like a fan of philosophical stories and artists, so I always go to people, and like Jung and Beckett and Sartre, and I'll be as my inspiration. So that's why when I saw that you have a philosophy background, I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. So with that in mind, and I tend, again, because I found, especially, a lot of the existential playwrights used humor. And so I like to use humor as a way to kind of talk about important topics. So that's how I attack. So it is a very funny play, but I want to really look at sex and connection and relationships in our digitally kind of all-encompassing times, and how really it's impacted how we relate and connect, and also how different generations kind of look at sex work, because it was seeing that, we're living in very transactional times right now, where everything, like if you're on a dating app, you're swiping. If you're on Amazon, you're swiping. And so I just thought, I want to look at that as well. So there's 5 characters. It's very much like Crazy Stupid Love, that if I go too much into the plot, it's kind of gives it away. But it's really dealing with these themes with 5 people that ultimately are interconnected. And it's a divorced mother, her college-age daughter, a suburban couple, and then this male personal trainer, OnlyFans, sex worker. And it's fun and fast and furious. And it really deals with taboo topics in kind of an easy to digest, hopefully inspiring conversation way.
Yeah. I find that one of the things that I was thinking about is out on living in Oregon, and for me is, every place has its problems, but I'm very sensitive to how like a culture is different. And one of the fascinating pieces in Oregon is that there's a strong reliance or a strong interpretation of like First Amendment speech. So there's a lot of deference to expression that's here, which means you see a lot of a lot more, at least for me, like creatively and otherwise. And I found it to be, very fertile to just kind of be and explore and to learn more about different things. So I've liked that environment. And I love the existential playwrights you refer to, of course, Beckett and Sartre. And we get some more into that. I did see that too. We're mutually excited, probably reading about each other. Jumping over, hey Paul, can you and sorry for how naive this question might be, but so I'm reading about how there's the cycle. I don't know if you call it a cycle, like the plays. You're working with Caytha, and you're doing your work, and there's another play, Anne Frank, and what is going on? Bring me in. What is going on with the creative process that's there in the rewrites? And are you working together as plays? Are you sharing time? Like, how's that all work? I really know nothing about that piece of it.
Sure. All 3 of these pieces came out of our developmental series that we do. It's called the Spark Theater Festival, and we do it twice a season. And it's a chance for artists to bring in their works in progress. They put them in front of an audience for one night, and then they get to sit with the audience and ask them questions about what they just experienced to help evolve, their work. And so all 3 of these pieces had been part, in the last couple of years, part of that series. And all of the playwrights all went through the process of, having a reading of their current draft put up and then being able to talk to the audience. I mean, it really is a great opportunity, because as a playwright, to be able to ask very specific questions to people who've just seen your work is like one of the most beneficial things, because then you can find out like what's landing, what's not landing, and something that you thought was really funny, they didn't get at all, or something else, they got confused about something. So it gives you that chance to go back and do rewrites and then do another reading and see if you've cleared everything up. And because writing is a constant process. I mean, you're never really done. You're to a point where like it's ready to go before an audience, but then there's still always a little bit of tweaking here and there and stuff like that. But these 3 pieces, because I've run the theater company for 30 years. This is our 30th anniversary. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. We've always been dedicated to playwrights and and artists and giving them a home where they can develop their work, because it takes a while to develop something, depending on how fast you write and do rewrites. And so these three, for some reason, I just felt that they kind of fit together as this is our return to off-Broadway. We haven't done off-Broadway in 10 years due to COVID and other situations. And so now I feel like the time is ready to come back again. And they're all such different formats and different writing styles that I think that they give an audience a wide variety of entertainment to come and see. So that's kind of how I pieced the three of them together.
I love that, and I'm so excited to hear about that process, Caytha. So you're within that, and I didn't know about that interactivity, right? Because a lot of times I've done some playwrights and talking to playwrights, but a lot of the artists I'd be talking to, the single would go out into the world, and then like where's the listener and that type of thing. So Caytha, you're part of this process. What's going on with this process and the feedback that you're getting? What's that like?
Well, it's so exciting because, I have a background in independent film. I've written plays in the past, but that's what it is. This is such an incredible art form because of what you're talking about. Because first of all, you're dealing with a live audience. And as you speak to many other art forms, it's out in the universe and you might see things on the internet, but you don't experience an audience. And it's as well as, Paul, as the artistic director and producer, has given me notes and thoughts on the process. The director gives, her input, as well as the actors. And since we have like a month rehearsal process, that is such an amazing experience to watch these actors really become these characters which you don't really get. Like, you certainly don't get that in independent film. Independent film, they read the script, they show up on set, they rehearse their lines while they're, setting up the scene, and it's not even shot in order. And there's nothing more thrilling and exciting to be able to, watch your cast become your characters and grow and embody them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask too, as far as that the process, just to learn, is this, how long does this part going, and also do most, like a lot of the plays that are they formed in this process with the interactivity that you described?
If you're asking me, I think that is somewhat typical of the theater experience, in new works especially. Paul gives this incredible opportunity for new works. If somebody goes to license an existing play, they're interpreting it. But when you're a playwright doing a new work and you have an artistic director, you have a producer, you have all these people, and it is incredibly collaborative, but the writer has a lot more input than, let's say, in film, where the director is a little bit more the king. So it's really nice. It is a wonderful process for an artist.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the main things when I started the company was that it is a company for playwrights, to make sure that the playwrights always were the center of the process. Like, we've never charged a playwright to submit or to participate. They always get a share of the box office, because it's so funny, because the playwright creates the product that employs everyone else. But yet, they want playwrights to pay $25 to have somebody read their play, or $50 to read their play. And it's like, well, they don't charge actors to audition. They don't charge directors to be interviewed. So we've always had that policy for 30 years because I think it's very important. And you also, over the course of a year, between our two series, we get over 350 submissions. So through that, I have to go through and read all of those, and then contact the artists and find out those playwrights who really are interested in working on their plays. Because sometimes you get people who are like, no, I wrote it and it's done.
Yeah.
But then you'll see that there's problems with that writing. And if they're not willing to go in and really work to make it a better piece, then you want to find those artists that are willing to collaborate and that want to go through that process, because it's only going to make the play stronger. I've never seen it make the play worse. So
Yeah, and thanks for describing that. One of the things I get excited about on the show is I'm excited about this conversation is kind of like the kinetic energy that's involved in this process, like art being made and that whole creative and what that environment is. And like sometimes I find even in doing the show, if I'm going into a particular form of arts, I have a need to get back to maybe this live energy or the play or the music, and it invigorates me. And I feel that energy. I want to say, Paul, hearing you talk and seeing what you've done, thank you for your work and the kind of dedication and the focus. Because me as an outsider to the arts world, you see these dollar figures and these entry barriers and things that I don't understand because I'm pretty much an outsider. But I just really love hearing about the collaboration and the accessibility. And on your side, it's saying, hey, if you want, it's like a collaboration. If you put something in and you want to make this what it should be, then we can work together.
I have to say that one of the things when COVID happened, we had a spring series that was just 2 weeks from opening. We had 65 artists over the 3 weeks that were dance, musicals, plays, and then everything shut down. And so for 2 years, we did some things that we recorded and put on YouTube just so we could keep helping artists. But when we came back in the fall of 21 to be in, see, I'm going to get emotional. It's like to be in front of a live audience and to feel that energy exchange again was just like, it's something that you don't get anywhere else. You have to have that exchange of energy between the audience and the actors and what's happening on stage because they both feed each other. And for 2 years of having that shut off, it was devastating for so many artists.
Well, and to piggyback on what Paul said, when we did the auditions in person, I mean, the actors too felt that same, feeling that Paul did, where they were like, oh my gosh, thank you for doing an in-person audition. We've done all these Zoom auditions and self-taping, and it was just, they had that same emotional experience of being in front of, a director and a playwright and a producer and doing it on a stage, their audition, and they were equally as moved.
It's wonderful to hear that and very much connected to the exchange. Let me ask you, Paul, just one more related to this from your perspective. With the pandemic and with this, radical change or whatever, the change there, have you seen something different happen with the playwright or the process or what's connected to it, or was it just kind of a pause and the energy's back in? Have you seen something just different come out?
It was really hard because I knew a lot of other theater companies. We rent our space just for our productions, but there were other people who actually had leases on spaces and they lost their leases, and a lot of them folded. So they went completely under. And so it was and then a lot of artists had, an adverse reaction to it. They just became so isolated that a lot of them, their creativity just kind of stopped. I mean, I know with myself, even though I had all this time because I wasn't working, I could not connect to being creative. There was just something stopping that creativity. And it wasn't until I was able to take off a mask and be back in a live situation that then I felt like it unlocked again. And I was able to start doing, because I started doing rewrites on Doris then after, about a year or so after COVID. So, but it was weird because I had all this time, but yet I couldn't connect artistically to anything.
Yeah.
It was strange.
What about you, Caytha?
Well, I mean, I found ways to be creative during the pandemic differently. And actually, the spark of this play, the thing that kind of triggered me writing the full-length piece, was a theater company that was doing these monologues, because they were like, okay, we have to find a way to have some sort of experience and do things like even in social media, like, somebody like Randy Rainbow, like how do we use the tools we have? But I was, a theater company was like, oh, can you do a monologue for an actor? And we will do it, on Zoom with a green screen. And that's kind of that monologue. I was like, oh, I feel like there's a bigger story. So I feel like the, our muses come and go, and the pandemic became a challenging muse. And, and again, I had worked in film, and I do think, obviously, as a labor person, all about the writers' strike and the actors' strike, but I feel like there was many things broken in the film business. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm a writer, I can pivot. And when I started to write this as a longer piece, I kept going, don't write it as a film, write it as a play, write it as a play, write it as a play. And, but I do think, to what Paul said, many theater companies are struggling with getting audiences back in, which I think part of it was because theater was the last thing to reopen after the pandemic. And I just think, it's a habit. Like, people might have gone and seen a lot of plays and tourism, but, it's getting that audience back. But I would like to say, as somebody helping Paul with ticket sales, I feel like we are doing quite well. So very happy that we are sort of breaking that mold.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear, and inspiring. All right, Caytha, this is legit philosophy and art program here, and I gotta ask you one of the big ones. You spend so much time in your life creating. You must think about it all the time. What is art?
Oh, wow, that's a deep question. So I feel like we all have these creative beasts inside of us. So to me, I'm kind of feeding and nurturing my beast in writing, but I feel like art can be anything, honestly. Like, I think for somebody, cooking or cleaning or scrap, like, I think art can be anything that is this process, a creative process that we have. Like, it's an active thing, but I think it can manifest itself many different ways. And it's this way of triggering, as I say, this beast inside of us that, waking her up, basically.
Yeah. All right. Wow. Beast inside of you. All right. Good.
Creative beast. It's this creative.
No, that's good. That's good.
Because she's in that cage and it's rattling, and all of us that suppress. And I do think that's kind of to an Eastern philosophy, like things like Tai Chi and whatever, is we can find art and creativity really anywhere. It's just on us to find that art.
Yeah. I just to interject. I brought it up a lot during the show, and just kind of like how we think about art and creativity. And the thinker who cracked my head open was David Lynch. Going very deliberately in, because there's this idea that we would all be familiar with of like that Dostoevsky, maybe tortured soul creator. And of course, if you're familiar with, like, David Lynch is like, yo, that's not where it is, and more of the attention to what arises maybe from a dreamscape or from your mind, and trying to catch those things, which is such a different way of viewing it. And I don't have the answer on it, but it was just a radical switch about kind of where the art comes from. What are you thinking, Paul? What is art, and that whole bit there too about how you create it? What's your thoughts?
I agree with Caytha. It's something that's very individual for individual people, and it can range anything from dance to solo work to musicals to plays to gardening to, because everybody in their own mind has an idea of what they consider something as artistic. Just all the different genres of plays. I'm not really into Shakespeare. I'm not really into Greek theater, but I like something that grabs me and takes me someplace I'm not expecting, and hopefully makes me either laugh or teaches me something. And that's sort of where I come from artistically. Like, I want an audience to come in and, after seeing something I've written, have had an experience, a journey. Either, again, it touches them somehow, or it makes them laugh their head off, or somehow they connect to it. Because I think when you, as an artist, connect to other individuals, that makes it real to them. It makes it something that they'll remember, and as they're walking home, they'll think about something from that. And if it makes them think, or it brings them entertainment, and helps to maybe like lessen the load of their life, then I feel like that means I've done my job.
Yeah.
And I just want to piggyback, because I do think, what is art? But I do think the audience is part of it. Because, there is no art in many ways if you don't have the audience. If you don't have, it's the tree in the woods. Like, does it exist? And, there are many who can just do it for themselves. But I think especially what the art forms that Paul and I are in, it's like the art and the patron of the arts are valuable and important and part of the whole experience.
Yeah. I was thinking of just kind of where art comes from and the energy, and there's all sorts of notions and ideas. And sometimes when I ask the what is art, it kind of like moves a little bit towards like the idea within Michelangelo that the forms were already out there, like the perfect was already there, and that the artist was the chipper if they were sculpting, right? The perfection was underneath. And I find that kind of switch around just fascinating, to think about. One of the, one of the cool things, I was thinking about being a labor activist myself for so long. The only theater that I can recall doing is street theater, which is very much part of, so I've had more fun, a couple times doing that. They put a monocle on me and I'd be the banker and, that type of thing. And I had so much fun with that because it was just loose and free. And it was really from the streets. We were writing it, as we're going. And that's been my connection to doing it. But I love it. And I love of feeling that and being somebody different. And I like how people can come together for what you're trying to work on, or show up, or stick a finger up to something and show it up and create right there. So I've enjoyed that. Limited performances, usually as the bad guy, but
I saw a similar thing that was talking about, about kind of landlords and how, how people come, because a lot of people, housing became a real problem after the pandemic because people were out of work. And this place at this community center did do it similar to what you did. They're like, okay, we're going to use theater as a way to have a dialogue on a social issue and involve the audience to come out and sort of role play. And it is, and that's similar to like my storytelling is like, okay, I want to unpack something. And in my play, it's about, it is kind of about sex and making it, dealing in a non-judgmental, destigmatizing way on things that are somewhat taboo. So it's not like, you're giving them things to think about, to what Paul was saying, but you're doing it in a way that's entertainment.
Yeah, I in looking, I was thinking from the outside individually on your topics, and I'll start with you, Caytha. What I first thought when I saw the play, and it's a sex positive podcast, but I'm looking at creating that, and I'm like, holy shit, like that would freak me out. What do I write about? Like, what's interesting to anybody? How do I get into this? Like the vulnerability to it. What was that process like for you to be like, to get into the content on the play, was there something different about it, or was it just a flow?
Well, I do feel like I go very deep into research and talking to people because I am kind of an extrovert. So that was kind of the fun where because like I said, it started as this monologue about a porn star, like OnlyFans sex worker going on a date on Match.com. And he's at the barber and he's super nervous and you don't know who he is at the end. And it's this guy so nervous about going on a date. And in the space, to me, I was like, okay, porn makes sex like this unattainable look at sex. And then I also thought social media makes romance very unattainable. So it was this kind of both sides, that he wanted this very unrealistic romance while he worked in this and that they're very different, that making love is very different than having sex. And that's what it kind of started, this guy with a heart of gold, looking for the perfect girl. And then I was like, well, what would be the foil to this character? And I'm like, oh, I know all these women, in midlife that are, a lot of times they're divorced, that are completely down on love because they cannot find somebody. So I'm like, okay, this guy's looking for love and who's, dejected by love. But I feel like once you pick your theme, all of a sudden things, which is in that synchronicity space, it feels like everywhere, like something is going to trigger the story and be part of the plot because, and you have to listen. And, that was kind of, the fun of it. And then I would be like, when people are like, oh, Caytha, what are you working on now? And I'm like, oh, a play about sex. And then that always got their attention. And, so it was fun, like the research. But what was the other thing you had said at the beginning? Oh, shoot, I just lost the train of thought.
Well,
about vulnerability. You asked about vulnerability.
Yeah.
I just feel when you get we are the naked emperor saying we have clothes on all the time artists. And you don't want to be called out for being naked. But I feel like you can only write well if you go to the vulnerable place. And that's to kind of Brené Brown and vulnerability. You just have to accept that. And otherwise you're not going to write well, because if you're writing out of fear, you're never going to be a good writer. And then I think, as I've told many writers, rejection hurts. People are going to say things that, may make you cry. And then you just have to wipe the tears and do it again, get up the next day and go back out there.
And it sounds from you, Caytha, you have the energy to keep going back in and working with Paul. And Paul expects that as like everything. It sounds most.
She does.
Yeah. Hey,
she makes
Paul,
me proud.
that's super. Paul, about Doris Day, and for you in describing the play, I was immediately intrigued visually thinking about it, of the photos that as a piece to move things along. I want to ask you regarding just the story itself in general. Was there anything, because Doris Day, America's sweetheart singer on film. Of course, anybody who is that on screen, we're going to surmise that life is very different from that. Were there a couple things that kind of just stood out or surprised you, or maybe even the visual on the photos that spurred the story where you're like, whoa, what is this with Doris Day?
Well, what's interesting is that the photos were chosen after I wrote it.
Oh.
So because along with the songs, initially I had 17 songs. And then I went through and I'm like, some of these songs are really great songs, but they're not doing anything for the plot. So I wanted the song and the lyrics in the song to be part of that moment in the script in her life. So I carefully chose the songs to reflect those parts of the script so that it had, a through line, basically. So the songs that she's singing, also were triggering these other memories that are happening to her. And, like you had mentioned before we started the podcast, the whole Charles Manson thing was so surprising because most people don't know that Charles Manson, her son was a record producer, Terry. he worked with the Mamas and the Papas, the Byrds, the Beach Boys. And so Charles Manson sent him a tape and wanted him to produce a song. So he went out to the commune and met him. But once he went home and he listened to the music, it just wasn't good. And so Charles Manson then started threatening him. And he was supposed to be at that house that night. But Doris told him that she wasn't going to be at her beach house. And he was dating Candice Bergen at the time. So they went to Doris's house that night. And then Manson got there. And because they weren't there, that was one of the reasons also that he killed all the others as a message to Terry. And so Terry then kind of spun into this whole drug thing of paranoia, afraid that Charles Manson was still going to come and get him. Slept with a rifle at night. I mean, all of this stuff. And that really, I had no idea. But in the film Once Upon a Time that Tarantino did, he actually put just a sliver of that in the movie about Doris Day's son, Terry. And I was like, that's so cool, because if you don't know that, he connected it that way. But that was one of the really fascinating things, because I had no idea that happened. And then she had really bad problems with husbands. She chose men who were abusive to her, but some of it was also self-inflicted because she never read contracts. She just signed things. And so these men took control of her life for a good chunk of her life. And so that was really surprising, because in most of her films, she's a strong woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it was a little shocking to find that out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back to the Tarantino film again to catch that catch that point in there, because I missed it during the first time. Yeah, that kind of shocking history. I listen to some podcasts and stuff, and I'm actually fascinated. The cases, Manson cases, just dark and mysterious and so atypical and just a horror that it's fascinating. But how there's something so scary, or like you were describing, the fear that was absolutely instilled. Each account that I read was they're coming after us. They are going to take us out. And even after the murders, some of the famous actors, they were all had guns when they were going to the wakes and wildness. Okay. Well, thanks for that. And I heard a lot about the Doris Day and the business and the deference and the control. And it's really a really difficult story, and some of the things that she went through.
It was a different time back then. Women were controlled a lot by the studio heads, and she was just happy to be working, so she just kept signing things that more and more of her rights went away. And her first contract, her agent took 50%, and the studio took another 15%. So it left her with 35%. So.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we hear these stories a lot, over time within entertainment. I think everybody kind of sits back a lot of times with a privileged position. Why do you sign that? Why do you sign it? Well, it's very much human behavior a lot of times, of those you're around, those you love or trust, or smart people, or the one with the suit, and people get caught up in these dynamics and sign stuff. It's not, it's not just being bullheaded or ignorant or anything. It's just, you get caught up in something that's bigger than yourself. All right, Caytha, I know, with the philosophy bit there, and you're talking existentialism, and on the show here, I do ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing? But I ask it in a way where to kick around maybe the absurdity or the profundity of the question, but also part of the thing I talk about is creating and create, starting with whatever's there and creating something out of it, which is maybe the subtext for this wild podcast I've been doing for 4 years. But Caytha, why is there something rather than nothing?
Well, wait, so just why is what? Can you ask the question again?
Well, what I would say would be if you want to approach it through the creative sense of creating something out of nothing, or like where's the generative piece to things?
Oh, I mean, that is to me what is amazing is the kind of is being an alchemist. I mean, because we have these things in our head, like Paul's like, oh, I want to do, a play that, looks into Doris Day's life. I'm going to do, and then all of a sudden it exists. And I never take that for granted. And then, even when we're rehearsing the play, I'm like, wait, did I actually write that? Like, there's times when I'm hearing that, I'm like, wait, how did I do this? And especially because it's like they all come together in the end. And I'm like, wait, when did I figure that out? Like, I find that it becomes like a very, what was the movie? Like Fantasia. Like, it becomes this weird kind of experience of becoming this magician and getting lost in it, and that's why I feel like, to what we were talking about with Michelangelo, like, stories possess me, and I can't really write until I have a story that possesses me, and then I just have to figure out how to get it out, and I do look at it as a puzzle that I have to solve, and I just feel like, okay, I know there is the play. When am I going to come up with this? Like, when is, am I going to get that spark, from the gods to have it come out of me? And I do think I never take for granted that it started as nothing and then it becomes something, and how kind of mind-blowing that is.
Yeah. How about you, Paul?
I think that writing wise, it's that blank piece of paper, and you look at it and all of a sudden something shoots into your head. And I was taught in high school by a creative writing teacher, never edit yourself. Just let it all come out. Let it all come out. Write out everything. Just write it. Never stop yourself and edit while you're letting it flow, because then you'll interrupt the flow. And so letting that flow happen and then going back and saying, okay, now I can go back and I can look at that. Because in the Doris piece, when it started out as a solo show, I did 3 or 4 completely different incarnations of it. One, it was set in a hospital room. One, it was set at in a high school. All these different things, and it was like, okay, it's not working. That's not working. And then all of a sudden, something was like, oh, and it clicked. And all of a sudden, out of this, nothing, I got this idea that then kind of made everything gel together. And even then, it's still like transformed from that point on. And one of the things that I have to credit that to is I had a really great director, Melissa, who's been working with me on this piece since the very beginning, from when it was a solo show to now. And she really, helps guide me. And I'm lucky as a writer. I can do rewrites. Like, when she wants changes, I do them that night and give them to her the next day, because it's just it. And I know some people are like, oh, I could never give up or let any of my words not be heard. And it's like, but if they're not helping your play, you have to let go of them. Even though you might think this is the funniest line or this is the most tender moment. Yeah. It's like, as they say, you have to kill your children.
Don't fall in love. Don't fall in love with that line.
No. And because then when it all comes together, you're like, oh my God, I don't miss it at all. And you can always put that somewhere else and bring it back or put it in something else if you really, really loved it. But if you want to love the entire piece, you have to let those things go.
I really get that. I in my union work, I tell it to a lot of my leaders and stuff like that, because I still do it to this day. Don't fall in love with your proposal, because it's going to break your heart. It's going to change. It's going to go away. And just creatively, I love that line, or you love how you did it, but no, it might or might not.
And you've got to have that flexibility, because there's a lot of writers I've met who will not. I have worked with writers who have brought in a piece and they will not change a word. They will not look at something again in another way, and it's frustrating, because it's like it could really be something if you're willing to make changes, but. Some people are very set that I wrote it and that is what I wrote and that is what it's going to be. And that's fine. And that is their right. But they're missing, what also has to translate to an audience. Because sometimes playwrights are so much in their head that they understand it, especially if they direct their own work, which I never suggest. You need another set of eyes.
Tell us about that. Tell us about that.
You understand everything because you wrote it. And so when you direct it, you're directing it from your own head, which means that you understand every word. But the people who are coming in aren't in your head. They have to understand it from not knowing anything. And by keeping it so centralized with you doing everything and not having another set of eyes, I think it really is detrimental. Because something that you're going to get because you know it so well, they'll come in and they'll be confused because they're not in your head.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me, like what you were saying before, because when you first brought up the idea, I was thinking with the workshopping, and then I'm thinking of it as just like if I've written something, and then I'm be like, yeah, trapped in my own head. Don't you know why this is funny? Because didn't you miss the 6th line? Because that was set up this line, and people are like, no, I don't give a shit. Like I don't know what you're up to. Who are you? And so I really understand that point, and like that reciprocity of the relationship of having people be honest with it and saying, wow, that was excellent that you thought you were weak on, or that really hit, but I had no clue for that 5 minutes why those characters were trying to figure this out, because so
I mean, I just want to add on that because I believe that's true, but also, and I know Paul's not saying this, you can't write by committee either. And there is the thing that, and again, I'm just clarifying on that. It was to kind of what you were saying about contracts. You have to have people that you trust and have expertise to give you notes, because everybody, and especially lots of times in writing groups, people give you notes on how they would do it, which isn't necessarily the right way. They're like, well, and so I do think it's important because writers, we're here and we're in our heads. You have to have ears. And that's the point. If somebody can say something's not working, and maybe you're like, you have to sort of trust your gut, go, okay, but if you hear it a couple more times, then it's a problem. And you have to be, and that goes back to also, we were talking about the vulnerability. When a writer comes in and is like, this is it, take it or leave it, like it's because they're closed up, and it's about having that vulnerability. And again, sometimes you can be like, okay, we'll try it your way. And if it doesn't work, you still have your other way. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I just think, and that comes with a little bit of maturity and experience to be able to, and to be, like I said, a good listener.
It's also interesting because I have a friend she's a really great writer, and she's written so many plays, but she's so afraid to have them seen by the public because she's like, well, what if they don't like it? And I'm like, but you, at some point you have to put yourself out there. If you never put your work out there, then no one's going to know like that you're really a great writer. There's always going to be people that are not going to understand something or not like the subject matter. That's just part of the world because we all have different experiences. But to keep yourself out of fear from putting it before an audience, you have to be stronger than that, because ultimately the reward will be that, out of those 100 people, 35 may really connect with the work that you've done. And that is worth that. So
and it's too what so many people in the arts say, like viewers can help, but reviewers sometimes can be your biggest enemy, and you can't, and that's why so many people, I didn't even read the reviews, because it's about the audience. And sometimes these reviewers, first of all, they're not seeing it many times with an audience. And so you have to balance all of that. And that's why I said, there are going to be times where you have this great audience and the next day you read the review and you're like, they couldn't stand it. And you're like, and you're worrying that, oh my God, my mom's going to read this horrible review. And that's where that's part of being the artist. And that's why I do a lot of it. It can be a very masochistic experience to be an artist, because it is about putting yourself out there.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for the discussion. I mean, it's and the nuanced aspects of it, and like what you were saying, Caytha, and Paul and I chatting about the point of what you get back from the audience. It's also the bit, because you're still there. You're trying to figure out at the same time when it's coming back in and trying to be open to what is useful suggestions or how other people see it. And I do a ton of collaborative work, and I just love kind of connecting with, I get a feel and understand a lot better what you're doing. Okay, let's before we finish up here, let's drop the details about Doris Day, My Secret Love, Sex Work, Sex Play, going on live, New York City. Give the listeners all the details they need to know about how to encounter these works. You want to start with you, Paul, and move to Caytha?
Sure. So they can go to emergingartisttheater.org. The show schedules for Anne Being Frank, Doris Day, My Secret Love, and Sex Work, Sex Play are there. The plays run for 8 weeks from September 4th through October 29th. They run in rep, so each play has 4 performances a week, so they run 7 days a week. There are matinees and evening performances. All the shows run basically 80 to 85 minutes total, in each play, so no intermission. Caytha, would you like to add?
Oh, all I just want to add is the plug that any of your listeners who are very curious about these works, we are welcome to have them go to other cities and other theaters. So this is just the start of our journey for all the people who are like, oh, darn, I live in Oregon. I can't get to New York City. Well,
let's make the art contagious. We very much share the same type of thinking. It doesn't have to be just New York City. Love New York City, but
these plays are very pack and play. They're very easy because they don't have an intermission. They have very simple sets, and so they're very easy to produce regionally in other markets.
Yeah. And I want to say just on plays themselves, because my show kind of goes into a lot of different areas. I mean, I'm really thrilled to be able to move into those, but sometimes there's this, you're saying about the, serendipity or synchronicity of things coming together. It's just, sometimes I end up with a contact with like a form, and just like one of my more recent episodes, Charles Payne, who was a playwright, just getting a play out there and talking about how they ended up putting it on in North Carolina, where he had never been, and he's an artist in residence in Madison, Wisconsin, and just like just kind of come in contact with plays and what's going on with that. I really want to thank you. Because I know you just said what the schedule is and what's going on and how busy you are to kind of jump on the show and chat about things. I really appreciate the both of you, and really inspired by our chat.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciated you inviting us to be here.
Yeah, it was a great dialogue. That's what's, thank you for including us on your podcast.
Yeah.
There was great energy here going among the three of us. So.
Yeah. And I like part of the thing is with me asking the questions too, which helps me, is whenever I'm asking the damn questions, I'm super interested in finding out what your answer is. And, so I really appreciate your time. And I certainly look forward into coming in contact with your work and learning more about, the Emerging Artists Theater, and, learning more about the plays that are upcoming. And thanks again. And I heard that the running through October 29th, was that correct on the date?
Correct. Yeah, September 4th through October 29th.
And as busy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Paul, right after our plays end, he's going into the new work series.
Yeah, our Spark Theater Festival starts October 30th and runs till November 19th. So I'm basically at the theater for 3 months. So
I was getting to this point where I was like, well, that's a long run. And so I see somebody working hard. I was going to tell you both to have a fantastic Halloween, run around the city, do whatever. But Paul, you're going to still be busy. So fit that in if you can.
I'll have a great Thanksgiving.
have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you both so much talking about plays, and whether, for the audience that's over there in New York City, check it out live, and for it's a worldwide audience on Something Rather Than Nothing. Learn about these plays, learn about the project, and say, hey, I want to see this in Minneapolis. I want to see this in Austin or Dublin.
Yeah, and I'm just going to plug my website, which is Caytha.com, where in addition to this, there's my other body of works, in case somebody wants to chat with me directly.
Caytha.com. Thank you. And unique name, right?
Yep.
Paul, just one final thing, maybe the website for the theater group?
emergingartisttheater.org.
Very good. Very good. Thank you both. And heck, sounds like we had enough to talk about. Probably have to do a second installment, right?
All right. Great. Well, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Take care now.
All right. Okay. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
And listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind-the-scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.